Dr. Una Park floated in the observation deck of the cruise ship Eternal Dawn, watching dancers perform in zero gravity. Their bodies moved like liquid silver against the backdrop of spinning asteroids. The sight was beautiful, but Una's mind was elsewhere. She had been reading old history files for her research, and something bothered her about today's date. "Computer, what's today's date?" she asked. "March 15th, 2087, the ship's AI replied in a cheerful voice. Una pulled up her historical database. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic screen. There it was, March 15th, 1087. Exactly 3,000 years ago, humans had signed something called the Great Armistice with a group called the Krellian Empire. She frowned. She had never heard of these Krellians before. On the bridge of the ship, Captain Lee Taman was enjoying his morning coffee when a strange sound came from the communications panel. It was a deep, rhythmic beeping that he had never heard before. The sound was coming from equipment that looked ancient, panels that were covered in dust and hadn't been used in his 20 years of service. "Hana, what's that noise?" he called to his communications officer. Kim Hana looked puzzled as she moved to the old panel. "I don't know, Captain. This equipment is so old that I need to check the manual." She pulled up files that were buried deep in the ship's computer system. "This is weird. It's an emergency frequency that was used thousands of years ago." The beeping stopped suddenly. Then a voice spoke in clear but strangely formal language. "Attention, humans of the former Federation. This is High Commander Veltar of the Krellian Empire. The Great Armistice signed 3,000 rotations ago has ended. You have violated the terms of our agreement by expanding into forbidden sectors 7 through 12 of the neutral zone. We formally declare the resumption of hostilities. Prepare for the consequences of your actions." The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then Captain Taman started laughing. "Is this some kind of joke? Who are the Krellians?" First Officer Park Jimin was already searching the ship's database. "Sir? According to these old files, the Krellians were a small alien race that humans fought briefly during the early space expansion period. That was over 3,000 years ago. Most people don't even know they existed." Hana shook her head, smiling. "This has to be a prank from the entertainment division. They're always trying out new historical shows for the passengers." The transmission repeated an hour later, word for word, then again an hour after that. Each time, the voice became more demanding and angry. Captain Taman ordered his crew to ignore it, but news of the strange transmission spread quickly through the ship. Dr. Una Park heard about it during lunch and immediately went to the bridge. "Captain, I've been researching this. The Krellians were real, but they were barely mentioned in historical records. Humans defeated them easily in a short war, then signed a peace treaty. Most historians consider them irrelevant, see?" Captain Taman said to his crew. "Ancient history. Probably some historians playing games with old equipment." By evening, the transmission had been picked up by other ships in the system. The story spread to news networks across human space. Within hours, it became the most popular topic on social media. People shared jokes about the ancient aliens with ancient grudges. Late-night comedy shows made fun of the formal, old-fashioned language used in the message. One popular comedian said, "These Krellians are so old-fashioned. They probably still use paper maps and think email is new technology." The audience laughed until they cried. Memes flooded the internet. Pictures of tiny aliens in old-fashioned armor, declaring war on humans who were too busy playing virtual reality games to notice. Videos of people pretending to be scared of ancient alien threats while eating ice cream and watching movies. The global news network treated it as a curiosity story. Reporter Jin Hyuk said, "In other news, a group calling themselves the Krellian Empire has declared war on humanity using communication equipment that belongs in a museum. Officials say this is likely a historical reenactment group that got carried away with their hobby. On space stations and colonies throughout human space, people gathered around screens to listen to the repeating message. Each time it played, the laughter got louder. Children made games about fighting the scary ancient aliens. Teenagers made jokes about how their homework was more threatening than the Krellian Empire." Dr. Song Mirai, a specialist in ancient alien cultures, was interviewed on the evening news. "The Krellians were a minor species that humans encountered during the first wave of galactic expansion," she explained. "They had basic technology and a simple warrior culture. The conflict lasted less than 6 months. They've been completely peaceful since then, assuming they still exist at all." "So this declaration of war doesn't concern you?" the interviewer asked. Dr. Song laughed. It's like being declared war upon by a historical reenactment club. The Krellians, if they're even still around, would have technology that's thousands of years behind ours. Their most advanced weapons would be like stone tools compared to what we have now. Back on the Eternal Dawn, Captain Taman held a ship-wide announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may have heard, we've received a declaration of war from a group calling themselves the Krellian Empire. I want to assure you that this poses no threat to our cruise schedule. We'll continue our planned route through the asteroid fields and you can continue enjoying your vacation. The passengers cheered and went back to their activities. In the casino, people started betting on how long it would take for the Krellian threat to disappear. In the restaurants, chefs created new dishes with names like Krellian Surprise and Ancient Alien Soup. Dr. Una Park spent the evening reading more about the original Krellian conflict. The records were brief and dismissive. Humans had encountered a small fleet of primitive ships. The aliens had demanded that humans leave their territory. When humans refused, a short battle followed. The Krellian ships were destroyed easily and the survivors surrendered. The peace treaty was simple. Humans would stay out of certain sectors of space and the Krellians would not attack human ships. Both sides had agreed to this because the Krellian territory contained nothing valuable, just empty space and a few worthless planets. It's amazing that they even remember the treaty, Una thought. Most humans forgot about them completely. She tried to find more information about what the Krellians had been doing for the past 3,000 years. But there was almost nothing. A few scientific expeditions had reported seeing strange signals from their territory, but no one had investigated. Why would they? The Krellians were considered harmless and irrelevant. As the night wore on, the transmission continued to repeat. Social media was full of new jokes and memes. Comedy shows prepared special episodes about the alien threat. Children across human space went to bed laughing about the silly aliens who thought they could scare humans. The message played one more time as Dr. Una Park prepared for sleep. The great armistice has ended. Prepare for the consequences of your actions. She smiled and shook her head. The only consequence will be more laughs tomorrow, she thought. Throughout human space, billions of people shared the same reaction. The Krellian declaration of war was the funniest thing to happen in years. It was a reminder of how far humanity had come, how powerful and advanced they had become. The idea that some forgotten alien race could threaten them was absurd. The laughter continued through the night, echoing across countless worlds and ships. Humanity had faced real threats before and conquered them all. A minor alien species with ancient grudges was nothing more than entertainment. No one noticed that the transmission had stopped repeating. No one wondered why the Krellians had chosen this exact moment to end their silence, and no one asked what the Krellians had been doing for 3,000 years while humanity forgot they existed. 2 weeks after the declaration of war, the laughter stopped. Admiral Kang Minho was eating breakfast in his office on Luna Base when the first report came in. The agricultural world of New Jeju had missed its morning check-in. This wasn't unusual. Communication equipment sometimes failed, or operators might be busy with emergencies. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Choi Deun, said as she entered his office. "New Jeju still isn't responding." "It's been 6 hours now," Admiral Kang frowned. "Send a technical team to check the relay stations. Probably just equipment failure." But 3 hours later, 2 more colonies went silent. Then another. By evening, 7 worlds had stopped communicating entirely. "This is too many for equipment failure," Admiral Kang said to his staff. "Something is wrong." He ordered Captain Choi Hwan of the reconnaissance ship Silver Comet to investigate New Jeju immediately. "Find out what's happening and report back as soon as possible." Captain Choi's ship was fast and equipped with the best sensors in the fleet. The journey to New Jeju took 18 hours. During the trip, 3 more colonies stopped communicating. "Captain," her sensor officer, Lieutenant Park Seojin, said as they approached New Jeju, "I'm picking up some strange readings from the planet. The cities are all there, but something's different." On the main screen, New Jeju looked normal from space. The lights of cities sparkled across the night side of the planet. Agricultural areas showed the regular patterns of farms and processing plants. Everything seemed peaceful. "Take us down for a closer look," Captain Choi ordered. As they entered the atmosphere, the strangeness became clear. The cities were perfectly preserved, but they were completely silent. No aircraft moved in the skies. No vehicles drove on the roads. The streets were full of people, but none of them were moving. "My God," whispered Navigator Ominsik. "They're all frozen." Captain Choi ordered a landing team to investigate the capital city. What they found was beyond anything in their nightmares. Every person on the planet had been turned into a living statue. Their bodies had become crystal-like, transparent but solid. Inside the crystal, they could see the people were still there. Their eyes moved, following the landing team. Their faces showed awareness and terror, but they couldn't speak or move. In the city center, children stood frozen while reaching for playground equipment. Parents held crystal babies who blinked helplessly. In offices, workers sat at desks with their hands still reaching for keyboards they would never touch again. "They're alive," Dr. An Yuri, the team's medical officer, said with horror in her voice. "They can see us, they can think, but they can't move or speak." Near the government building, the landing team found something else, small objects that pulsed with blue light. They were about the size of a human fist, made of some unknown material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "These weren't made by humans," said Chief Engineer Lee Wanshik. "The material is unlike anything we've ever seen." Captain Choi immediately sent the findings back to Admiral Kang. Within hours, the news reached Earth Command. The joking about the Krellian threat stopped immediately. Dr. Song Kyung, Earth's top expert on alien technology, examined the images and recordings from New Jeju. Her analysis was terrifying. "These artifacts are definitely Krellian," she announced to the Emergency Council. "But the technology is far beyond what they had 3,000 years ago. This crystallization process preserves the victim's consciousness while making their body completely immobile. It's a fate worse than death." Admiral Kang ordered more reconnaissance ships to check the other silent colonies. Every report that came back was the same. Entire populations turned to crystal, aware but helpless, with Krellian artifacts left behind like calling cards. Then the Krellian fleet appeared. Long-range sensors picked them up at the edge of human space. The ships didn't look like anything in human records. They were organic-looking, flowing shapes that seemed to bend space around them. They moved through space like living creatures swimming through water. "How many ships?" Admiral Kang asked his intelligence officer, Commander Yu Jae-hyun. "That's the problem, sir. Our sensors can't get an accurate count. The ships seem to exist partially outside normal space. Sometimes we see 50 ships, sometimes 500. They're using technology we don't understand." Captain Nam Hyejin of the Deep Space Monitoring Station reported more disturbing news. "Sir, these ships aren't just advanced, they're adapting. Each time our sensors try to lock onto them, they change somehow. It's like they're learning from our attempts to study them." The first direct encounter happened near the Centauri system. Commander Shin Woo-jin led a patrol fleet of 6 ships to intercept a small group of Krellian vessels. What happened next shattered humanity's confidence completely. "Target the lead ship," Commander Shin ordered. All weapons, full power. Humanity's most advanced plasma cannons fired at the Krellian ship. The energy beams passed right through it as if it wasn't there. The alien vessel didn't even slow down. "Sir, our weapons aren't having any effect," reported Weapons Officer Kim Ji-won. "It's like we're shooting at ghosts." The Krellian ship responded by firing a single beam of crystalline energy. Commander Shin's flagship, the Brave Explorer, was hit. Within seconds, the entire ship and crew of 300 people became a crystal sculpture floating in space. The other 5 human ships fled. Immediately, Dr. Song Kyung worked desperately to understand the new Krellian technology. Her research team analyzed every piece of data from the encounters. "They haven't just advanced," she reported to Earth's leadership. "They've evolved. 3,000 years ago, the Krellians were a simple warrior race with basic technology. Now they're something completely different. They've learned to manipulate space and time itself." Dr. Jin Sola, an expert on quantum physics, made an even more disturbing discovery. The Krellian ships exist in a state of quantum superposition. They're simultaneously in multiple locations and states. That's why our weapons can't hit them, and our sensors can't track them properly. President Kim Il-sung called an emergency meeting of all human leaders. Representatives from every colony, space station, and military unit joined the conference. "How many people have we lost?" she asked Admiral Kang. 17 colonies completely crystallized. That's over 40 million people, all still alive but trapped. We've lost 12 ships trying to fight them. The Krellian fleet is moving deeper into our territory, and we have no effective way to stop them." The room fell silent. For 3,000 years, humanity had been the dominant force in the galaxy. They had the best technology, the strongest military and the most advanced science. The idea that they could be helpless against any enemy was unthinkable. "What do they want?" asked Colony Administrator Park Sun-ho. Dr. Song Kyung had studied the Krellian messages and behavior. Based on their actions, they don't want to destroy us. They want to harvest us. The crystallization process preserves human consciousness. They're collecting our minds for some purpose we don't understand. "How is this possible?" demanded General Yoon Seok. 3,000 years ago, we defeated them easily. How did they become so powerful?" "They had 3,000 years to prepare," Dr. Song replied. "While we grew soft and peaceful, they've been evolving and planning. We forgot about them, but they never forgot about us." Reports continued to come in from across human space. More colonies falling silent. More fleets crystallized when they tried to fight. Refugee ships fled toward the inner systems carrying stories of terror and helplessness. On Earth, panic began to spread. For the first time in thousands of years, humanity faced an enemy they couldn't defeat. The news networks that had made jokes about the Krellian threat now showed endless footage of crystal cities and impossible alien ships. Dr. An Minji, a quantum physicist, made one final discovery that shattered any remaining hope. "The Krellians aren't just using advanced technology," she announced. "They're controlling fundamental forces of reality itself. They can decide whether their ships exist in our dimension or not. They can choose whether our weapons affect them. They're operating on a level of science that we can't even comprehend." Admiral Kang stared at the tactical display showing Krellian forces moving steadily toward Earth. Red markers indicated lost colonies. Blue dots showed refugee ships fleeing in panic. The enemy fleet appeared as shifting, uncertain shapes that his best computers couldn't properly track. "Sir?" his aide asked quietly. "What are your orders?" For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kang had no answer. Humanity had always solved problems with better technology, stronger weapons, or superior tactics. But the Krellians had made all of those advantages worthless. The aliens that humanity had dismissed as harmless relics were now an unstoppable force moving through human space like a plague. Every encounter ended the same way: human defeat and more crystallized victims added to the growing collection. As night fell on Earth, billions of people looked up at the stars with fear instead of wonder. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was coming home to finish what had started 3,000 years ago. The age of human dominance was ending, and nobody knew how to stop it. General Yoon Seok stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, staring at maps that showed humanity's shrinking territory. Red zones marked areas under Krellian control. Each day, more blue human sectors turned red. The situation was getting worse by the hour. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his staff. Colonel Lee Do-hyun, his tactical officer, pulled up the latest numbers. "We started with 2,000 active military vessels. We're down to 800 that are still functional. Most of our losses happened when ships tried to fight the Krellians directly. And our ground forces? That's the bigger problem, sir. Most of our colonies don't have armies anymore. They have police forces for dealing with crime and emergency teams for natural disasters, but no real military units. We haven't fought a serious war in 3,000 years." General Yoon felt the weight of that truth. Peace had been humanity's greatest achievement, but it had also made them weak. While the Krellians spent 3 millennia preparing for war, humans had forgotten how to fight. Dr. Jin Sola was brought out of retirement on Luna Base to help understand the enemy. At 90 years old, she was the only living expert on ancient Krellian culture. Her research had been considered useless for decades. Who cared about a defeated alien race? Now it was humanity's only hope. "Tell me about their weapons," General Yoon said when she arrived at headquarters. Dr. Jin looked tired and worried. 3,000 years ago, the Krellians used simple energy weapons and basic shields. Nothing special. But what I'm seeing now is completely different. They've evolved beyond anything we thought possible. She showed him recordings from the latest battle. Krellian ships moved through space like living things, changing shape and size as needed. When human weapons fired at them, the shots simply passed through empty space where the ships had been moments before. "They're not just avoiding our weapons," she explained. "They're existing outside our normal reality when they choose to. It's like they can step sideways out of our universe whenever they want." Commander Lee Do-yun led humanity's next attempt to fight back. He commanded the retrofitted Dreadnought, indomitable spirit, the largest warship in the human fleet. It carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. "This time will be different," he told his crew as they approached the Krellian fleet near Centauri Gateway. "We'll use coordinated attacks from multiple directions. They can't dodge everything." The battle was a disaster. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, fusion missiles, particle beams, and gravity weapons all targeted the Krellian ships. For a moment, the space around the enemy fleet blazed with enough energy to light up a star. When the light faded, the Krellian ships hung in space completely undamaged. They hadn't even moved. "All weapons had no effect," reported Weapons Officer Park Ji-ho, his voice shaking. "Sir, our strongest attacks didn't even scratch them." The Krellians responded with their crystallization weapons. Beams of strange blue energy reached out across space, moving faster than anything the humans could track. One by one, human ships stopped firing and became beautiful crystal sculptures drifting through space. Commander Lee watched in horror as his fleet died around him. All ships retreat immediately. Only 3 ships escaped out of 25 that had entered the battle. The indomitable spirit survived because the Krellians seemed to lose interest once they had crystallized most of the fleet. Dr. An Minji, a quantum physicist, made the most disturbing discovery yet. She had been studying recordings of Krellian ships and their impossible movements. "They're not using technology as we understand it," she announced at the emergency science meeting. "They're manipulating the basic forces that hold reality together: space, time, matter, energy. They can change the rules of physics in small areas around their ships." "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Song-kyung. "I don't know. It shouldn't be possible at all. But they're doing it anyway. They can make their ships exist in multiple dimensions at once or exist in no dimensions at all. When they fire their weapons, they're not sending energy through space. They're changing the laws of physics to make crystallization the natural state of matter in that area." The refugee crisis was getting worse. Ships full of terrified families arrived at Earth every day, carrying stories of planets where everyone had been turned to crystal. The refugees described the horror of watching friends and family become living statues, aware but unable to move or speak. President Kim Il-sung tried to maintain calm, but even she was beginning to panic. In her daily broadcasts, she assured humanity that their scientists and military leaders were working on solutions, but privately she knew they had no answers. "How long until they reach Earth?" she asked Admiral Kang during their secret meeting. "At their current speed, 2 months. Maybe less if they decide to move faster." "And our chances of stopping them?" Admiral Kang was quiet for a long moment. "Madam President, in 40 years of military service, I've never said this before. We cannot win this war. Our weapons don't work. Our tactics don't work. The enemy is using science that we can't understand or copy." The thought of surrender was almost too horrible to consider. Humanity had never surrendered to anyone. They had always found a way to win, always overcome their enemies through intelligence, courage, and superior technology. But the Krellians had made all of those advantages meaningless. Dr. Park Sun-woo, the government's top ethics advisor, argued against surrender in the emergency council meeting. "If we give up, billions of people will spend eternity as conscious statues. Death would be more merciful than what the Krellians are doing to us. But if we keep fighting, everyone dies anyway," argued Admiral Kang. "At least if we surrender, some of humanity might survive in some form." "That's not survival," Dr. Park shot back. "That's a fate worse than death. We need to find another way." "What other way?" General Yoon demanded. "We've tried everything. Our best weapons, our smartest tactics, our most advanced technology. Nothing works. The Krellians are operating on a level of science that makes us look like children playing with sticks." The debate continued for hours. Some leaders wanted to evacuate Earth and hide in the outer colonies. Others suggested trying to negotiate with the Krellians. A few even proposed using nuclear weapons against human colonies to prevent them from being crystallized. Meanwhile, the war continued to go badly. Every human fleet that engaged the Krellians was destroyed or crystallized. More colonies fell silent every day. The blue area on the strategic maps grew smaller and smaller. Captain Nam Yejin brought news of the latest defeat near the Ross system. We lost 40 ships trying to protect the mining colonies there. The Krellians crystallized everything. The miners, the defense platforms, even the automated equipment. They're not just taking people anymore. They're preserving entire civilizations as trophies. Young Lieutenant Kim Hana, who had first heard the Krellian declaration of war, was now serving on the front lines. She had stopped laughing about ancient aliens. Instead, she filed reports about impossible ships and weapons that violated the laws of physics. "Sir," she told her commander, "the Krellians aren't acting like conquerors. They're acting like collectors. They want to preserve us exactly as we are, forever. They're building some kind of museum of living beings." Dr. Song Kyung spent sleepless nights trying to understand the enemy's true purpose. Why keep people conscious after crystallization? Why not just kill them? There has to be a reason. Her research into ancient Krellian culture provided a possible answer. 3,000 years ago, the Krellians had a religion based on preserving perfect moments forever. They believed that the highest form of art was to capture life at its peak and keep it that way for eternity. "So they're turning our people into art?" General Yoon asked. "More than that. They're creating a permanent exhibition of human civilization. Every person they crystallize becomes part of their collection. They probably see this as honoring us, not harming us." The realization made the situation even more horrifying. The Krellians weren't acting out of hatred or anger. To them, this was a form of worship, a way of showing respect for humanity by preserving them forever in crystal. As more reports came in from the front lines, the truth became clear. Humanity was facing an enemy that they couldn't fight, couldn't understand, and couldn't reason with. The Krellians had spent 3,000 years becoming something beyond human comprehension. President Kim Il-sung sat alone in her office, looking at the surrender documents that her advisors had prepared. Signing them would save some human lives, but it would also doom humanity to eternal imprisonment in crystal bodies. Outside her window, she could see people in the streets, still going about their daily lives. They didn't know how close defeat was. They still believed that their leaders would find a way to save them. "We need a miracle," she whispered to herself. But miracles seemed to be in short supply. The Krellian fleet continued its advance toward Earth, leaving a trail of crystallized worlds behind it. In 2 months, maybe less, they would arrive at humanity's home world, and humanity still had no idea how to stop them. Dr. Ryu Jaeho had always been curious about locked files. As head of the Geneva Historical Archives, he had access to almost everything from humanity's past. But deep in the basement levels, there were vaults that even he couldn't open. Files marked with warnings and seals that hadn't been touched for thousands of years. With the Krellian fleet only weeks away from Earth, Dr. Ryu decided that desperate times called for desperate measures. He used his emergency override codes to access the deepest levels of the archive. What he found changed everything. The files were labeled Pre-Armistice Military Records, Classification, Level Maximum. Most of the documents were damaged or corrupted, but enough remained to tell a story that no modern human had ever heard. Dr. Ryu's hand shook as he read through the reports. According to these records, the Great Armistice wasn't a peace treaty between equals. It was a surrender document forced on humanity by every other intelligent species in the galaxy, working together. 3,000 years ago, humanity hadn't been the peaceful scientific race that modern people believed they were. They had been something else entirely, something that had terrified the entire galaxy. The files described weapons that Dr. Ryu couldn't even understand. Molecular disruptors that could turn entire planets into dust. Consciousness viruses that could drive enemy populations insane from across star systems. Reality engines that could rewrite the laws of physics in large areas of space. But the weapons weren't the worst part. The worst part was how humans had used them. One report described the conquest of the Altair system. Humanity hadn't just defeated the local aliens. They had erased them so completely that no trace of their civilization remained. Their planets were stripped of resources, their populations were optimized for efficiency, and their culture was deleted from history. Another file talked about something called the harvest campaigns. Human Fleets would arrive at alien worlds and give the population a choice: submit completely or face extinction. Those who submitted were modified to serve human needs better. Those who resisted simply vanished. Dr. Ryu found a recording made by an alien diplomat during the peace negotiations. The creature's voice was full of terror as it spoke. Humanity must be contained. They do not conquer, they consume.
They do not rule, they optimize.
If they are allowed to continue, they will turn the entire galaxy into an efficient machine with themselves at the center. We must force them to change or we must destroy them. The Great Armistice had been the galaxy's solution. Every major alien species had joined together to force humanity to sign an agreement that would fundamentally change their nature. Humans would give up their weapons of mass destruction, abandon their expansionist culture, and become a peaceful scientific species. But they hadn't just agreed to this willingly. The archive contained evidence that alien scientists had actually modified human psychology during the signing of the Armistice. They had used advanced technology to suppress humanity's aggressive instincts and warlike nature. For 3,000 years, humans had been living with artificially modified minds. Their peaceful nature wasn't natural evolution, it was alien programming. Dr. Ryu immediately contacted President Kim Il-sung. "Madam President, you need to see this immediately. Everything we thought we knew about human history is wrong." Within hours, a secret meeting was called. Only the highest-level leaders attended. Dr. Ryu presented his findings to a room full of shocked faces. "Are you telling us that our entire civilization is based on alien mind control?" asked General Yoon Seok. "Not control exactly. More like artificial conditioning. They suppressed certain parts of human nature and enhanced others. They turned us from conquerors into explorers, from warriors into scientists." Admiral Kang studied the ancient weapon specifications. "These technologies, they're beyond anything we have now. If humans really built these things, where are they?" Dr. Ryu had found that answer too. Quarantined. All the dangerous technology was moved to special storage facilities and locked away. The locations were classified at the highest levels and then forgotten over time. President Kim Il-sung felt sick as she read through the reports. So the humans of 3,000 years ago were monsters? "They were effective," Dr. Ryu corrected. "They conquered half the galaxy in 200 years. No alien species could stop them. The only reason the expansion ended was because every other intelligent race worked together to force humanity to change." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Their entire understanding of human history had been turned upside down. They weren't the descendants of peaceful explorers and scientists. They were the children of the galaxy's most feared predators. Captain Nam Yejin was called in to discuss the practical implications. "Sir, if this is true, then the alien modifications might be reversible. We could restore humanity's original nature. That would make us as dangerous as the Krellians," warned Dr. Park Sun-woo, the ethics advisor. "Maybe more dangerous. According to these files, humans were worse than conquerors. They were optimizers. They didn't just defeat enemies, they improved them to serve human purposes. And right now we're facing extinction," Admiral Kang pointed out. "The choice isn't between being good or evil. The choice is between becoming monsters or watching our species die." The debate that followed was the most important in human history. Dr. Ryu had located 3 of the quarantined storage facilities. One was on Europa, one was hidden in the asteroid belt, and one was buried deep under the Pacific Ocean on Earth itself. Dr. Song Kyung analyzed the weapon specifications. "Some of these technologies are beyond our current understanding, but others, we could probably rebuild them with modern materials and techniques. The question is whether we should," said Dr. Park Sun-woo. "If we use these weapons, we'll be proving that the aliens were right to fear us. We'll become the monsters they tried to prevent us from being." "We already are those monsters," General Yoon said grimly. "The aliens didn't change our fundamental nature, they just suppressed it. Every human carries the genetic memory of what we used to be. The only question is whether we let that memory wake up or die with our species." President Kim Il-sung studied the ancient records of human expansion. According to the files, pre-Armistice humanity had been incredibly successful. They had conquered vast territories, developed impossible technologies, and built an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. They had also been absolutely ruthless. One report described a human commander who had discovered an alien species that could regenerate from any injury. Instead of being amazed by this ability, the commander had immediately begun experiments to see if this regeneration could be transferred to humans. The experiments had taken months and involved thousands of unwilling alien subjects. Another file talked about humans who had found a species with natural telepathic abilities. The humans had captured the entire population and used them as living communication devices, keeping them in tanks and forcing them to relay messages across space. They weren't evil, Dr. Ryu realized as he read more files. They were just completely practical. If something could be useful, they used it. If someone was in their way, they removed them. They treated the entire galaxy like a resource to be optimized. The Emergency Council voted on whether to open the quarantined facilities. It was the closest vote in human government history. When President Kim Il-sung cast the deciding ballot, her hands were shaking. "We open the vaults," she announced. "God help us, we wake up the monsters." Captain Nam Yejin led the mission to Europa. The facility had been hidden under the ice for 3,000 years, protected by security systems that most humans couldn't even understand. When they finally broke through the final barriers, they found a warehouse full of nightmares. Weapons that could destroy stars, devices that could transport armies across galaxies instantly, machines that could rebuild matter at the atomic level, technologies that could control time itself within small areas. But the most disturbing discovery was in the final vault. It contained records of something called the Human Improvement Project. Before the Armistice, humans had been modifying themselves, making their bodies stronger, their minds faster, their lifespans longer. They had been turning themselves into living weapons. "We weren't just conquerors," Captain Nam reported back to Earth. "We were becoming something beyond human." The aliens didn't just stop our expansion. They prevented us from evolving into something that could have dominated the entire universe. Dr. An Minji studied the quantum technologies they had recovered. These weapons work on the same principles as the Krellian ships: reality manipulation, dimensional shifting, consciousness transfer, but the human versions are more aggressive. Where the Krellians preserve and collect, these weapons destroy and remake. As teams worked to understand and rebuild the ancient technologies, something strange began happening. The humans working on the project started to change. They became colder, more focused, more willing to do whatever was necessary for success. Dr. Song Kyung noticed it first. The weapons aren't just tools, she realized. They're designed to awaken the old human nature. Simply studying them is bringing back the suppressed psychological patterns. The change spread throughout the research teams, then to the military units working with them. Fleet Admiral Jang Min-seo stood on the bridge of the rebuilt dreadnought Terra's Wrath, watching her fleet prepare for battle. The ships around her no longer looked like the peaceful vessels that had carried families and cargo across human space. They had been transformed into something darker and more deadly. The humans crewing these ships had changed too. Admiral Jang could see it in their eyes, a coldness that hadn't existed before the vaults were opened. They moved with deadly purpose, spoke in clipped, efficient sentences, and showed no fear of the enemy that had terrorized humanity for months. "Status report," she ordered. "All ships ready for combat," replied her tactical officer, Commander Shin Jae-won. "Weapon systems are operating at full capacity. Reality manipulation drives are online. The fleet is ready to engage the enemy." Through the main view screen, Admiral Jang could see the Krellian fleet in the distance. The alien ships still moved like living things, shifting and flowing through space in ways that should have been impossible. But now the humans had weapons that could reach them. "Begin the attack," Admiral Jang commanded. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded history. "Commander." Shin activated humanity's first reality warping weapon, a device called the Cascading Reality Collapse. It worked by targeting the quantum superposition that allowed Krellian ships to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Instead of trying to destroy the ships directly, it forced them to choose a single reality. The effect was devastating. Krellian vessels that had been untouchable suddenly became solid, real, and vulnerable. Their ability to phase in and out of normal space was gone. For the first time since the war began, alien ships started exploding under human weapons fire. "Target the command ship," Admiral Jang ordered. "Show them what humans can do when we stop playing nice." The human fleet unleashed weapons that had been banned for 3,000 years. Molecular disruptors reduced entire alien vessels to scattered atoms. Consciousness viruses invaded Krellian minds, driving their crews insane with visions of human victory. Time dilation fields made enemy ships age thousands of years in seconds, turning them to dust. But the most horrifying weapon was the Liberation Protocol developed by Dr. O. Suman. It was designed to free humans who had been crystallized by Krellian weapons. However, the process had been modified to become something much worse. When the liberation beam hit crystallized humans, it didn't just free them, it turned the rescue process into a weapon. The freed consciousness would create a feedback loop that traveled back through the Krellian network, shattering alien minds across vast distances of space. Every human they had crystallized became a bomb that exploded in the Krellians' collective consciousness. The Battle of Wolf 359 lasted only 4 hours. When it was over, the entire Krellian fleet had been destroyed. But Admiral Zhang wasn't satisfied with simple victory. She had her ships track down every escape pod and destroy them. No Krellian would survive to warn their homeworlds about humanity's new capabilities. "Sir," Commander Shin reported, "we're detecting more Krellian fleets throughout this sector. They're moving to reinforce their forward positions." "Good," Admiral Zhang replied with a cold smile. "That will save us the trouble of hunting them down." The human fleet moved deeper into Krellian space, destroying everything they found. But they weren't just fighting to defend their territory anymore. They were conquering, expanding, and improving everything they touched. Captain Yu Tai-hyung led the assault on the Krellian mining colonies. Instead of simply destroying them, his forces used human optimization technology to remake them. The crystallized alien workers were freed, but then immediately modified to serve human purposes more efficiently. The mining output has increased by 400% since we took over, he reported to Admiral Zhang. The alien workers are much more productive. Now that we've improved their basic design, Dr. O. Suman had developed new applications for the liberation technology. We can free crystallized beings and then modify their consciousness to make them more useful, she explained to the fleet commanders. Instead of just rescuing victims, we can create allies who are perfectly suited to help humanity. As human forces pushed deeper into alien territory, they encountered other species that the Krellians had conquered over the millennia. Entire civilizations had been crystallized and preserved as trophies. The humans offered them a choice: join the war against their former captors or remain as living statues forever. Most chose to join humanity's cause, but the rescue process changed them. Human technology didn't just free them from crystallization, it optimized them for war. Species that had been peaceful became aggressive. Aliens that had been individualistic became perfectly coordinated. Every rescued civilization became part of humanity's growing war machine. Commander Park Ji-hoon led the transformation of the Vexari, a species of natural telepaths that the Krellians had captured centuries ago. "They're much more useful now," he reported. "We've enhanced their telepathic range and linked them directly to our communication networks. They can coordinate our entire fleet instantaneously." The rescued Vexari no longer looked entirely like their original species. Human modifications had given them cybernetic implants, enhanced nervous systems, and direct mental links to human computer networks. They were grateful for their freedom, but they were no longer truly alien. They had become part of humanity's expanding organism. Captain Nam Hye-jin discovered something even more valuable when human forces reached the Krellian research facilities. The aliens had been studying consciousness itself, learning how to preserve and manipulate the minds of living beings. But their research was primitive compared to what humans could do with it. "We can do more than just crystallize consciousness," Dr. An Minji realized as she studied the alien research. "We can copy it, edit it, and transfer it between bodies. We can create entire armies of minds perfectly designed for specific purposes." The implications were staggering. Humanity could now create custom consciousness for any task. Need pilots for dangerous missions? Create minds that felt no fear and lived for the thrill of combat. Need scientists for complex research? Design consciousness that could process information at superhuman speeds. The human fleet approached the Krellian homeworld with an escort of modified alien allies. Ships crewed by optimized beings from dozens of species, all perfectly coordinated through telepathic networks controlled by human commanders. Captain Yu Tai-hyung led the final assault, but instead of destroying the Krellian homeworld, humanity chose to demonstrate their new philosophy of war. Target the planetary consciousness network, Admiral Jang ordered. Begin the conversion process. The planet-wide beam that struck the Krellian homeworld was beautiful and terrible. It freed every crystallized being on the planet simultaneously. But it also connected all of their consciousness into a single network controlled by human operators. The entire Krellian homeworld became a living monument to human victory. Every alien consciousness was preserved and aware. But now they served humanity's purposes. The planet became a massive biological computer, processing information and creating new technologies for the human war machine. They wanted to preserve consciousness forever, Dr. Osuman observed, as she watched the transformation. We're giving them exactly what they wanted. They'll be conscious and aware for eternity, serving humanity. The war was over, but humanity's expansion had just begun. Ambassador Li Nayan delivered humanity's new message to the Galactic Council, the organization that had once forced the Great Armistice on humanity. The 3,000-year experiment is over, she announced to the terrified alien representatives. Humanity has remembered what we are and what we can become. We offer the galaxy a simple choice: peaceful cooperation with humanity's expansion, or optimization to serve our purposes more efficiently. The council chambers fell silent. Many of the alien species present remembered the old warnings about humanity. Their ancestors had fought and bled to contain the human threat. Now their worst fears were coming true. We will resist, declared the Altarian representative, a being whose species had survived the first human expansion. We expected you would, Ambassador Li replied calmly. Resistance provides valuable data for our optimization processes. Thank you for volunteering. Within months, human fleets were moving through the galaxy, offering every species the same choice. Most surrendered immediately. Those who resisted were defeated and then improved to serve humanity better. The modifications weren't cruel, they were practical. Humans didn't torture their enemies or rule through fear. They simply made every being in the galaxy more efficient at serving human purposes. A warrior species might be modified to feel joy only when protecting human colonies. A scientific race could have their curiosity redirected to focus on human research projects. A trading civilization might find their greatest satisfaction in managing human economic networks. Everyone was happy in their new roles because humans made sure they would be. Consciousness modification ensured that every being genuinely wanted to serve humanity's expanding civilization. The galaxy became a vast, coordinated organism with humanity at its center. Every species, every planet, every resource was optimized for maximum efficiency and harmony.